The courtroom doors were heavier than I expected. They groaned as I pushed them open, the sound echoing through the chamber like an accusation. Every head turned at once, lawyers mid-sentence, jurors mid-breath, the bailiff mid-step. The air felt tight, formal, almost sacred, as if the room itself resented my interruption. And then there was the judge. He froze, one hand resting on the bench, his expression shifting from routine authority to unmistakable shock. His brows drew together slowly, like he was looking at something that didn't belong in his world. "Why," he said carefully, leaning forward, "are you here?" A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head, but none of those rehearsals accounted for the way my heart now pounded against my ribs or how every instinct in my body screamed to turn around and walk right back out. But I didn't. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I'm here because the truth has been missing from this courtroom." That earned me a sharp look from the defense attorney and a confused glance from the prosecutor. The bailiff took a step toward me, clearly ready to escort me out if the judge so much as nodded. The judge didn't nod. Instead, he stared at me for a long moment, his eyes searching my face as if trying to reconcile memory with reality. I knew that look. It was the same look people gave when they recognized someone but couldn't quite place where. "State your name," he said finally. "My name is Daniel Mercer." The reaction was immediate. The prosecutor stiffened. The defense attorney whispered something urgently to his client. One of the jurors gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. The judge's face drained of color. "That's not possible," he said quietly. I took a step forward. "It is." "Mr. Mercer," the judge said, regaining some of his composure, "you were declared deceased 8 years ago." "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, "and that declaration is the reason I'm standing here today." The courtroom buzzed now, barely contained chaos threatening to spill over into outright disorder. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order," he barked, "order in the court." Silence returned, though it trembled like a held breath. "You have exactly 1 minute," the judge said, locking eyes with me, "to explain yourself before I have you removed." I nodded. 1 minute was more than I'd ever been given before. 8 years ago, I had been a witness in a high-profile corruption case. A real one: bribes, forged permits, unsafe construction, the kind of thing that made headlines and ruined reputations. I was an accountant then, buried in numbers most people didn't bother to read, but I read them. And what I found could have put several powerful men behind bars. 2 weeks before I was scheduled to testify, my car went off a bridge. At least that's what the official report said. What it didn't say was that I'd received anonymous threats for months, or that the brakes on my car had failed in a way no accident could explain, or that a fisherman pulled me from the river, half dead, miles downstream and disappeared before authorities arrived. When I woke up in a rural clinic under a different name, the doctor told me I was lucky to be alive. I told him he was wrong. I was already dead. I vanished because staying alive meant putting everyone I loved in danger. My wife, my sister, my parents, they were all safer believing I was gone, and for 8 years I stayed gone, different towns, different jobs, different faces in the mirror as time wore me down. But last month I saw the news. The man sitting at the defense table today, Harold Whitman, was on trial, not for corruption, not for the lives ruined by his decisions. For murder. For the murder of Thomas Hale. A name that hit me like a punch to the chest. Thomas Hale had been my replacement. After I died, the prosecution scrambled to rebuild their case. Thomas was a junior accountant, eager, honest, and tragically unprotected. He testified, and 2 months later he was found dead in what was ruled a robbery gone wrong. Except it was. I knew that the moment I saw Whitman's face on the screen, calm and confident, like a man who had never faced consequences in his life. And I knew something else too. Thomas Hale had died because I didn't testify. My minute was almost up. I'm here, I finished, because an innocent man is on trial without the full truth, and because another innocent man is dead in my place. The judge's gavel hovered in the air. "Remove," the defense attorney began. "Sit down," the judge snapped. Every eye in the room was on him now. "You're telling this court," the judge said slowly, "that you faked your death, lived under false identities for nearly a decade, and chose today to resurface." "I didn't fake my death," I replied. "Someone else tried to make sure it was real. I survived." The judge leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Do you have proof?" I reached into my jacket. The bailiff stiffened. "Your Honor." "It's all right," I said, carefully pulling out a worn leather folder. "This is everything I had left, copies of the original financial records, names, dates, transfers, and," I hesitated, then continued, "a signed affidavit I wrote 8 years ago explaining why I disappeared." The prosecutor was on her feet now. "Your Honor, if this is legitimate." "If," the defense attorney cut in sharply, "this man isn't committing fraud and obstructing justice." The judge raised a hand for silence. "Bring the documents forward," he said. As the bailiff took the folder from me and delivered it to the bench, I felt my legs begin to shake. I hadn't realized how much I was relying on adrenaline until it started to fade. The judge flipped through the pages slowly. Very slowly. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the lights overhead. Finally he looked up. "I remember you," he said. The words hit harder than I expected. "You were supposed to be the key witness," he continued. "The case collapsed after your death." "I know," I said softly. The judge's gaze hardened. "And now you've walked into my courtroom in the middle of a murder trial and expect what exactly?" I met his eyes. "Justice." For a long moment no one spoke. Then the judge turned to the court reporter. "Go off the record." A collective breath escaped the room. He stood, stepping down from the bench, something judges almost never did. When he stopped in front of me, his voice dropped. "You understand," he said, "that what you're admitting to could land you in prison." "Yes," I replied. "And you're willing to accept that?" "Yes." "Why?" I thought of Thomas Hale, of my wife who had mourned a man who still breathed, of 8 years spent running from my own name. "Because hiding didn't save anyone," I said. "It just delayed the truth." The judge straightened and returned to his seat. "Back on the record," he said. He picked up the gavel. "This court will take a recess," he announced. "Effective immediately, proceedings are suspended pending verification of new evidence and witness identity." The gavel struck. Pandemonium erupted. Reporters flooded the hallway outside. Lawyers argued in hushed but furious tones. I was escorted to a private room where federal agents waited with expressions that ranged from disbelief to grim satisfaction. For the first time in 8 years, I gave my real name without flinching. The days that followed were a blur: DNA tests, fingerprints, records cross-checked against old files. Every test confirmed the same impossible truth. Daniel Mercer was alive. The trial was reopened. Charges expanded. Evidence I'd brought connected Whitman not only to Thomas Hale's murder but to a network of intimidation and silencing tactics that stretched back decades. When I finally took the stand, the courtroom felt different. Heavier, more honest. The judge looked at me, not with shock this time, but with something close to respect. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "do you swear to tell the truth?" "I do," I replied. And this time I meant all of it. When the verdict came down weeks later, guilty on all counts, the courtroom erupted again. But this time it wasn't chaos, it was release. Afterward, as the room emptied, the judge stopped me at the door. "You asked for justice," he said. "You got it, but it came at a cost." "I know," I said. He studied me for a moment. "Most people spend their lives running from the truth. You walked back into it." I nodded. It was time. As I stepped outside, the sunlight felt unfamiliar on my face, like a life I wasn't sure I deserved but was finally ready to live. For the first time since the moment I walked into that courtroom and heard the words, "Why are you here?" I knew the answer. I was there to stop being a ghost. And to make sure the truth, no matter how late, finally had a voice.